Thanks, colleagues. We'll try and be time conscious. So, before I start, I just need to say something here. Mary Antoinette was a queen of France in the 1700s. She was, extravagant. I think the country became bankrupt. Not largely because of her, but she contributed. So there's this thing that is always words that are attributed to her to have said. Some people that say she didn't say it, but I think she said it. When they said people ran out of bread, and she said, let them eat cakes. So it goes into what we are here for, that if we have a problem and people just trivialize the solution as if it's just nothing, you can just solve it. And then we end up with these problems like this. One case and example is the issue of load shedding currently. Somebody wrote a report and said we must build 5 gigawatts of batteries.
Recording in progress.
And load shedding will stop in 2024. And a lot of money has been spent, and no one here can stand up and say load shedding will stop next year. Some of you are aware of a Meridian report, and we know that report is not going to help the country. So it's the same story of let them eat cakes type of a solution that people suggest sometimes. So without delaying, the first session, can I ask Engineer Zakele Madela and Engineer Tumel Kopan and Engineer Jacob Marocha to come and sit in front, because they are panel leaders of this topic here. It says here the gruesome SA energy security crisis and the needed urgent interventions. It's fireworks, gentlemen and ladies, and I think if you are wearing a jacket, please take it off. So I think sometimes some of these things, I don't know about the remote people, are they still connected?
Yes, they are.
Are we able to take their questions, but rather is there a way that they can just write down and then you can just let me know, be aware of it?
Yes.
So that when we go for discussions, we'll take their views into confidence. Yes, on the chat books, yeah. And I assume Mr. Makapula will manage that for us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I don't want to delay. I want to introduce the 3 gentlemen. We only have 30 minutes of this topic, and we'll stick to this 30 minutes. I suspect at the end we will have more time, and we'll be able to return back to the original topic. Thank you.
How does it work?
Oh, this is how it works. I assume that each speaker will have something to say first in terms of the opening up and the views of that speaker in terms of the topic that is currently at hand. And if you have something to a speech or a presentation, that will be up to your decision. But when I'm saying the mic is yours, I mean it's time that you take charge. It's up to you guys how you divide that 15 minutes between yourself. But you have 15 minutes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, fellow Africans and South Africans. My name is Zakele Madela. My name is Zakele Madela. I'll try and keep it very calm in the interest of time, because I don't think we'll be able to speak to the topic in the 5 minutes that we have. Respectively so, I had prepared the presentation, but I will not go to it. So, The country is in a crisis of electricity, and I just want to speak from my heart, if you may allow me, and maybe abandon my speech a little bit. This is a very same company called ESCOM that was voted utility number 1 in the year 2001 or so. If you look at the problems that we are currently encountering with regards to our electricity system, there's too many problems in the basket. There's too many, far too many. You just don't know where to start. And then you start wanting to blame certain people, and then you step back and you say, but what could have gone wrong? What is it that needs to be done? Because the power stations are there and the private sector has come in. But why is it that our national utility is in this debt spiral now? I will summarize it because of time. I will summarize it the way I see it, and also what other people have said. Let me start with what other people have said. Many people believe that we should not be having load shedding at all, and I also believe that this load shedding or the electricity crisis that we have in the country was man-made, not is man-made. The reason why I use the language of was man-made, the people who brought us here, it's the same people that needs to go to prison. And it's the same people that we harbor our hopes that they are going to reverse it, and they will not. At the heart of this are two fundamental challenges at ESCOM. It's a liquidity problem, especially cash liquidity. Our national utility doesn't have the money to finance operations and maintenance. And what brought about this liquidity problem, if you just look from a distance, it's bad contracts. Who signed those contracts is the same people that are the principals of the people that are deployed at ESCOM. What are those key main bad contracts? It's coal contracts, it's the independent power producers contracts, it's the services contracts. Why is our government and the people who are running the country to guarantee us power not being able to reverse these decisions? They've got a vested interest in the people that supply those services and in the people that got those contracts. So let's remove the blame culture. What do we do then as ELP? Our suggestion is that let's work together with the solution-driven people. Let us avail ourselves to the men and women at ESCOM, especially the fellow engineers at ESCOM who are today finding it very hard to come out and tell us where they are not being supported, where they need to be supported. We know at the heart of this, they are completely incapacitated, especially with the financial resources and the decision making. I don't want to go into the myriad of reasons how ESCOM is being collapsed. This isn't about the blame. It's about the fact that in order for us to stop the electricity crisis that we have in the country, we need to ask ourselves a very difficult question. Who's going to take us out of this load shedding? And if we don't ask that question, we'll never be able to arrive at the answer, because we will be given a group of people that are going to string us along for the next 3 years, and we'll be back again to where we are, if not worse. So I hope with the formation of ELP, we are going to withdraw the blame, and we are going to be more solutions driven, and we're going to become a trusted source that is able to be invited by our very own business leaders as well as public office bearers leaders to try and reverse those difficult decisions that we have to reverse today. We have to reverse those decisions. And as I said to you, because of the interest of time, I had prepared a little bit of speech here, but I'm also going to talk about on the relevance of what can we do, even though our first number one challenge is that we need to get out of load shedding. But we are a country now that is in this vicious cycle where we are almost a rudderless country in terms of how to contain the system. Because apparently it doesn't look like at our national utility there's people who even do planning to say to the people, how many of these coal-fired power stations can we get in the next 6 months, 9 months, 18 months? What has been taken from one power station to another power station? What is the plan? No one wants to talk to that. We always hear from the office bearers, which is the political leaders. It's their ESCOM, we voted for them, but can we hear from the technical people at ESCOM to tell us exactly what is it that they need to be supported with so that we all come out of this debt spiral? And as I said, because I'm limited by time, but we can't be a country that is now living on load shedding. There are people who come to South Africa to offer to work with us on an agent basis, on a medium-term basis, as well as on the long-term basis, because South Africa is not going to close down tomorrow. We are running with the proposal solutions that are speaking to the renewable energy solutions of wind, solar, and battery energy storage. You know the technicalities and the problems with those. No country has been able to do those and be able to get its power system to work. Even the leading countries have been scrambling for coal, gas, and they are heavily investing in nuclear. So there's people who have proposed to work with us, to try and convert some of these power stations into gas to power. There are people who are even offering to turn around the coal fleet that we currently have. And I'm hearing there's a group of expert panel that come from Germany that is supposedly looking at these power stations with an idea that they are going to advise the government how many of these are salvageable and how many of these must be open up for the private sector. In other words, there's an admission that our government cannot run them, but someone else can run them. I think as ELP, we should all be looking forward to that report and offer ourselves to say, how can we say, hang on, are we in agreement with what is being proposed to us? And of course, the issue of gas and the issue of better coal and the issue of nuclear. I'm always troubled by the fact that why is it that when it comes to gas, which is a very problematic solution for me because there's all the uncertainties about the availability of gas and the price dynamics and everything. But our Transnet National Port Authority is the only state entity that is assigned to assist us with the solution of gas. It leaves out ESCOM itself, and it leaves us your biggest gas consumer, which is Sasol. And it doesn't even talk about our state-owned Petro SA. We need all those four parties to be together and then be able to say, we can maybe come up with what is a practical solution with regards to gas. In terms of nuclear, of course, we have a procurement of 2,500 megawatt of nuclear. It's going to be opposed, and we're going to need to be on top of our game to submit to try and support it. The integrated resource plan of South Africa is currently being reviewed, and there's a lot of people who have hopes to say the solution to get us out of load shedding lies in the immediate reviewed IRP, integrated resource plan. But I've always had a problem with that because there is an integrated energy plan that talks about the dynamics of all of these inputs for all these technologies, including the gas, including the nuclear, including the coal. It has never been reviewed. I think we as ELP, we must also look into that and say, how can the integrated energy plan be in a better position to inform the conclusion of the integrated resource plan, because for the third time we are running with the integrated resource plan that is not informed by the integrated energy plan. And that is why you are unable to link Sasol, Transnet National Authority, Petro SA, as well as ESCOM when it comes to gas. That is why you are unable to listen to the people who are proposing the replacement of the coal power stations with the small modular reactors as well as with nuclear. And my very, very last point, which I think we will do if we stay in this home of ELP, I'm not sure if it is worthwhile to review this white paper on energy, because on the face of it, it looks like it accommodates all technologies, but try to implement some of the technologies, you get told you will not be able to do it. Try to speak to the government officials that they have to promote an energy democracy where anybody that wants to work with us as a country, they can extract from this white energy paper and start to have a decent conversation. Perhaps we as ELP will be able to look into this document and ask ourselves whether it should be reviewed. Let me just stop at that point and I'll be open to your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tumelo Khopane. So I'll also make my opening remarks on the session. Firstly, let's thank Palace and the team for the hard work that goes behind setting up some of these, not just the event, but starting off with the organization itself. Because pull together this kind of thing, setting it up. It's a registered NPO as we speak. It's got banners as we see, and a bit of administrative capacity. So I think we must appreciate that and don't take it lightly. And as engineers in the country, I think we have been quiet for far too long on certain issues. And I think some of the engineers, myself included, will be speaking as lone voices in the corners, and we all know the consequences of those. So it's sometimes better when we then work together as a team. Right. So I think for me, one of the comments of the engineer general, as we speak as a country, we don't have an integrated infrastructure master plan. As in zero. We don't have it. Sandra would have its GIS there. ESCOM would have its GIS there. Everyone has. Transnet will have its GIS there. Metros, they've got capacity also. Some of the secondary municipalities, Polokwane. But we do not have an integrated GIS master plan as a country. And I think people like the engineer general would have to push certain things like that. The CETAs, I think a lot of engineers, the mandates of the CETAs is to do training, but largely that money is spent on entry-level training, learnerships, and nothing wrong with that. But I think as ELP we need to begin to consolidate and understand which CETA deals with technical training, let's say engineering training, consolidate and tap holistically into this funding, because there's quite a bit of it. It lies everywhere, EW CETA, LG CETA, cup manufacturing CETA, and we need to consolidate and begin to tap into that. Then I think the academic alignment, the medics have done it, they're doing it. Doctors, when they come out of university, they're able to do work. Medical doctors, dentists, optometrists, and so on. So we don't need to go far. We need to go and find out how are they getting it right. Because a dentist comes out of school and they can actually do what a dentist is anyone. The same with an optometrist, the same with the GP. All the medics, physiotherapists and so on. So we don't need to go far. We need to understand how their curricula are set up such that when they come out of university, they're able to do immediately do what they're supposed to be doing. I think we all know, I mean, energy is the backbone. I'm not gonna talk the textbook stuff. Now coming to the solutions, or some of the solutions, furthermore, now delving deeper into the energy. I think we as ELP need to insist that the Energy Crisis Committee War Room needs to be revamped. And we need to go and find out if are there engineers there, the various engineers that are required from generation right up until house connections. Well, in fact, from mining coal and fuel and whatever, and uranium and so on, from nuclear, right up until to the house connections. We need to have those engineers in that war room, and their discussions need to be transparent. We all hear there's a war room, there's an energy crisis committee, but their discussions are not transparent to the public, unless maybe some of you have seen those discussions, but I definitely haven't. And understand and ensure that this committee, while engineers are represented in there, it also presents to cabinet, so that cabinet resolutions are taken and actually implemented by the relevant DGs and CEOs of entities. I also think that in the Office of the Engineer General, but maybe while it might take time to set that up, perhaps in ESCOM now, or I don't know where, we need a chief future officer. I think as a country, we struggle to look 10, 50, 100 years ahead. And maybe that's where some of our problems are. We wouldn't be where we are if 30 years ago we looked 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ahead. So perhaps as an immediate action, ESCOM requires a chief future officer. What this lady or gentleman will be doing on a daily basis is to see what should energy generation look like in 50 years time. Where is the world going? And that's what he or she will be doing. So that, and then informing future plans and so on. So as I'm saying, I don't know if we should put this person inside ESCOM, public enterprises, or where. I'm not sure, we can debate that. Then I think Zakele touched on the IRP. I would just like to add that, can the IRP look into the feed-in tariffs from customers, including household customers? We need to start crystallizing that policy, because there are a lot of people who've got embedded generation that is wasted, which could be fed back into the system. There's a bit of it here. Mondi is doing it there, or let's say the paper guys are doing it in Richards Bay and here and there, a few that. But it's not a global thing in the country, for instance. So we need, because you need proper metering for that, all right? In Richards Bay, we did that with Mondi, and you had to go and change the metering setup in the substation. You have to go and change the switchgear, because we need to be able to trip either way. You understand? And you need to be able to meter either way. So we need clarity on that also as we review the IRP as a country. Then I think the other one has been spoken about quite a lot, that baseload coal will remain baseload. We just need to categorize our power stations, repurpose that need to be repurposed. So I won't repeat that. The other one that I would like to add is, I think we need to re-energize EEDSL. Remember, I think we all remember EEDSL. It was a big thing after the Bolt story at Kubech, when we started with the load shedding thing. However, EEDSM largely concentrated in the house, in lighting. and quite a bit of RLM, but we didn't go enough into RLM. RLM, that would be the ripple load management for the geysers. And then the other thing that EEDSM should do now is go into industry. There's a lot of heat dissipation wasted in industry that can be captured and utilized by industries to power themselves, right? So, and of course, other process optimizations in industry. So I think for me, if we re-energize EEDSM, its main thrust should be in industry for two reasons: to capture heat recovery, so that industries can self-generate, and then of course also to optimize the processes of industry, because there are a lot of inefficiencies in some of the production processes in industry. And then of course, we've got a lot of RLM systems that are lying dormant in the municipalities. Let's start with those and get them working. But the problem with RLM systems is, if you just install them and you don't do maintenance on the substations, they're not going to work. So the new EEDSM must go with O&M for whatever duration. Wastewater treatment plants and landfill sites have got methane gas. Why don't we harness that holistically as part of alleviating the problem? I think we all know the transmission lines. You drive anyway, the transmission lines are rusting through. We mustn't forget that also. And then the last comment will be vandalism. We need to push for some law around scrap dealing, because a lot of the steel from the substations and power stations is sitting in scrap, and we know, where the problem is. So we need to address that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no, I can speak for maybe those going to be a panel discussion. My opening remarks, firstly, I think congratulations for this launching of ELP. I think it's a very good initiative, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we hope we can support whichever way we can. So my remarks will be as follows. And I know the topic is energy. We need to be careful that we don't get caught up in the effects, not in the root causes. So the energy problem is an effect, it's not the root cause. The effects are energy, transport, rail, water. Those are the effects. But what are the root causes? Or unemployment? Those are the effects. I'll offer two ideas, I think, and I'll just give one example with those ideas. So for me, what is the root cause, what is the problem? Industrial vision in economic vision. The lack of industrial and economic vision is one root cause, and the second connected to that is thinking ecosystem. So you cannot solve ESCOM without solving, for instance, the ecosystem of ESCOM. And I'm going to use an example where we look futuristic in terms of how other people have done. Now, I don't know how many people are in the solar business. I'm in the solar business. Anybody who's in the solar business? Now, in a solar panel, there's a thing called the cell. And behind the cell, there's a thing called the wafer. So the fundamental element in a solar panel is the wafer. That's where the energy conversion happened. Now, in terms of industrial vision, one of the biggest examples is how China took over the solar panel manufacturing in the world. Today, China controls about 90% of all PV made in the world. It controls 97% of the technology that goes into the wafer. Right? How do they do it? maybe 15, 20 years ago, they studied the entire ecosystem of how to make PV. Now, the biggest part is you get polysilicon, you change it to ingots, you slice the ingots into wafers, then you put them into the cell to create a panel. They went and studied all the ingredients and the contents of that value chain. You know, from all the minerals that goes into it, the energy, the technology, the process. Over 20 years, where they were probably maybe 5% of the world's production, they are now 90 and 97% in some of the elements, right? They are the cheapest, so no one can beat them. They've got the volumes, and no one can beat them, right? So what does that mean in terms of South Africa? Our power system was working as an integrated ecosystem of the mining industrial complex. And over the years, we begin to cut that supply system into bits. That's where we are. So the point I'm trying to make in terms of solving the energy, solving any infrastructure, start with the end in mind. What is the industrial vision? Where do we, the biggest thing in South Africa, if you ask anybody, what is the industrial economic vision of South Africa? I don't know whether anybody will answer. But if you go to China and ask them, they will tell you that we want to be the manufacturing base of anything important for the world. We want to be the manufacturing base. And when they target a sector, they look at its entire value chain and they try to control the entire value chain. So, those will be my opening remarks, then we can delve deeper into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Joseph, a struggling start. We started at 2027, and now what? Sorry. That's,
the solutions have been proposed: power ships, return the units of ESCOM that were neglected, hop on to the very quick solutions, which are mainly according to the deployment of PV in rooftops, but also let's look at the waste to energy. But really the answer, the way I see it, accept that the countries that were almost on the brink of where South Africa is, which is Germany, UK, and USA, they didn't hesitate to love coal and look after it. So we need to count how much of our coal plants can be prioritized, even if it means delaying repaying the debts that we have with the people, to say to them, we have a commitment to pay you, but right now the country is bleeding. We need to fix these power stations. We also need to encourage our government to be very strong and prioritize the retainment of the coal versus the export coal. It's no use that the government washes its hands and say it doesn't control the coal export. We need to be guaranteed that good coal is delivered at ESCOM. But also from a financial point of view, I've got to go back to the contract. We have this white elephant in the room, which is 64 independent power producers. They literally take about 21 billion rand a year from ESCOM. And apparently, when they were signed, there was an anticipation that the country may not be able to afford. When the minister says, today we are paying R5.35 a kilowatt hour for the very same kilowatt hour that ESCOM is only recouping 84 cents. I mean, it goes without saying, review that contract, offer the guy R1.10, tell him to go. And let me not hog the thing quickly. And then Tsepo, I think the one that is relevant to me, you talk about the political talk between the political talk of a blackout. I think from where I'm sitting, ESCOM, even though is offering the solutions, but ESCOM tends to be forced to talk into what is really happening. We need our engineers at ESCOM to be the one that are leading that talk. And Mr. FIFA Moleleki, you spoke about I think you'll speak directly to Mapara because you spoke about the ELP. Mapara can answer that question because you were saying what role can ELP can play. Let me go back to I think there was interesting ones at number 3, which was asked by Mr. Andrew Motseke. He talks about the lack of implementation of what needs to be done right now. And I think I kind of like provided the answer again, which I've already talked about. You've got 15 ESCOM power stations of coal. 11 of those should not be any of the units there should be operating. But there's so many of them that are not operating. So there lies the answer say. And then Edmund, if I go to something that is relevant to me, he talks about the divide, where there are people at the coal face of this, which is the ESCOM people, that's how I understood you, to say where are they. I think, again, from my perspective, let's take a very sympathetic approach. Everybody that has told us about the problems at ESCOM has never been the power station managers themselves, has never been the engineers themselves. And if we sit here and try and say we know, I would say I don't know. I may lambast, but I feel for them. And I think let's find a way to encourage our government to let those men and women speak for themselves. If we could have each and every power station manager being able to be allowed to speak to the country and say, I've got 6 units and only 3 of them are working. And my biggest problem is finance or is ordering spares to return these ones. If I were to return these ones, this is how much my power station will contribute to arrest the load shedding. In that way, we will have a frank conversation. But right now, we've been listening to everybody except for the men and women who know why some of these units are done. And the last one, I think it was a question on, we need to make this work for us. And I don't know who asked that question. We need to make this industry work for us. And I wanted to say this in my presentation, to say, when the government talks about the immediate solution of 15,000 megawatts of PV solar, we mustn't be shy to say we know where that is going to go. Let us go and open up open spaces on the back of the township. Let us lead that fight to go and plug the PV solar panels there. Let us go to the rural areas and identify vacant land where there is ESCOM substations and ESCOM infrastructure and lead the investment to those areas so that the money trickles down to us as Africans. And I think let us be deliberate to say all of these 15,000, let's try and see how can we maybe take 10,000 of it and direct it exactly to the communal land, to the tribal authority land, to the people in the townships, because that's where the answer is. And I've heard about microgrids. I'm not going to commit myself whether that will work, but let's investigate the possibility of those microgrids on the back of the township and in rural areas. Thank you.
No, thanks. I think Patrick Ndlovu, of course we are business people, a number of people here. So naturally, as we provide solutions, R&D comes at a cost. The implementation of solutions comes at a cost. So yes, engineers must not shy away from acknowledging that they are business people. We're probably the least paid per hour professionals in the country when you compare to some of the professionals like attorneys and the medics and so on. Then Renguma, the challenge is coordination. We coordinate poorly as a country and a particular government. The relevant DGs, CEs, the CEO of ESCOM, DG of Public Enterprise, DG of Mineral, DMRE, maybe even the commissioner or whatever they call the accounting officer at NERSA. These people's performance agreements, in my view, should be intra-assessed. So, meaning the CEO of ESCOM must not only be assessed by the board, the DG must equally assess that person. Both DG, DMRE, and vice versa, because the CE would need something also from the DG, and he drags his own feet. Let me give you an example. Those of you who know the Richards Bay area, we put potholes there on a provincial road, right? After writing, I don't know how many emails and letters to the HOD of roads in Province, who didn't bother to respond to the city, right? Now, if a head of infrastructure of a city struggles to get a response from an accounting officer of the roads department, what more about ordinary citizens? So I then said to the team, we're going to put on those potholes, I don't care what the HOD thinks of, and then we will address those issues afterwards. So it's important that, why? Because there's no accountability, there is no intra-assessment. We all know in the private sector, especially in corporate private sector, there are SLAs between departments, there's intra-accountability, there's 360 assessment and all of that. Nothing of that exists in government. So, and that is the biggest challenge in my view. Ramatsike, I think it's the same thing. There is no accountability to respond to that. And then I think Ramashava, I agree with you, but in our country where we don't have public transport systems, that might not work, because the people that you are saying must start at 10 and leave at 10 in the evening and 7 and what are not you and I who can hop onto a car. They are general workers who have to use taxis and so on and so on. So that's the challenge, is that these people who operate these things on the shop floor, use public transport, and our logistics in the country are not really geared up for some of these things that might be a little bit fancy. Yeah, I think that's my view on some of these things. Thanks.
Look, on the issue of vision, we can talk, but it's slightly much deeper than just a document. Because let me just give you an example. I think when you go and try and look at documents that China has produced, you may not find any written strategy or document. It's all high level. But the bigger issue is, whatever they decide, they socialize it deeply, so that you don't even now need a document, because you've discussed it so much that you know. So anybody who's in any senior position know where the country goes, and from there on, it's more about activities towards getting there. But we can talk about those kind of discussions in our one-on-one. Your second question, let me take your second question as well, because it's related. What are the short-term quick wins? The problem with South Africa, we're wanting short-term quick wins. Okay? We want instant things. We want Bafana that we should win the World Cup, but we don't have a school soccer, right? We want to solve our coal problem, but we've got a Department of Environment that has got minimum emission standards. Those minimum emission standards, if they're implemented, 15,000 to 20,000 of Eskom capacity must be closed down because we don't comply, right? So at the moment, Eskom operates on an exemption, right? Exemption which can impact 50 to 20,000. So they're operating illegally. They have to ask for an exemption to operate those plants, because a department made minimum emission standards that the power system can't meet. Okay? All right? We have a coal ecosystem. Eskom, 100% of their coal used to come from, by conveyor belt. We are now at 50%. 50% is on road. The road can't handle it, ESCOM can't handle it. Right? So the point I'm making to you is that when you say instant solution, it's almost like we don't know where we want to go. Let's say we don't know whether we want to go to Cape Town or want to go to Midrand, but we say, let's run there. Right? Now, running, if you don't know where you're going, running is not going to help. You're going to have to figure out, take the time to understand clearly where you want to go, and then once you've agreed where you want to go, understand clearly what it takes to get there. And if you don't do that, it doesn't matter whether you run instant solutions. We're here because of instant solutions. And I'm not saying there are no quick wins, but I'm just saying the issues are so deep and so integrated that if you just run for instant solution, you'll keep running. So, blackout, and I think on a blackout, technically, and I think I begin to agree with you. The damage of load shedding is making the blackout seem less scary, right? The damage of constant power not being there, even this boogeyman of the blackout becomes even less scary. Because what is a blackout? I mean, there have been blackouts in the world. It's never the same thing. It doesn't mean the whole country can go down. It can be a partial blackout. We've had a partial blackout in the Cape. New Zealand has had a blackout of South Australia. South Australia, it was 8 hours, right? So, and they dealt with it and they moved on, right? So, but you're right. The constant daily load shedding is doing much more damage than whatever blackout. Blackout, if it comes, it will be a few days, maybe a week, but it goes. And the probability is quite low. But this constant 8 hours of load shedding, and I think you've been telling me, you had, in your space, you had to close down because of the transport shedding, if you like. So the economic damage is much more than, the load shedding damage. So to put it simply, the serious risk is materialized, which is constant blackout. Constant load shedding. Yeah. The other things I think my colleagues have dealt with, I think the issue of climate change. The issue of climate change, I don't want to venture into trying to contradict settled science around CO2 emissions being linked to temperature increase. I don't want to venture there. I think scientists are dealing with that. I think for us, the question is, our contribution towards it in terms of the things that we're trying to do, is it of a significant nature given the size of the problem? Right? Firstly, you must understand the problem is a 200-year problem. Once we started using coal-based, in fact, carbon-based fuels, as humanity, we started dealing with climate change. And who has done most of the damage? The developed world. And what are we contributing in South Africa? About 1.8%. Even if you take all of South Africa's carbon emission, you won't solve the entire crisis. The other issue, of course, they say if you don't do it, then you won't have trade because your carbon inputs into your product will be high. But that is tax that if it comes, you have to take. You don't have to shut down your industry to comply to an emission standard. Because if you close our coal too quickly, we won't have an economy and industry left. So what are you trying to protect? However, we need to be responsible and do what we can. But the most important thing for me, and I think maybe let me end here. This debate about renewables and coal and sometimes misses the point, right? The notion that you can shut down your coal, they can be replaced by renewables, doesn't work anyway. Everywhere else in the world, what they've done, where they're doing renewables, they leave their thermal plants running, they up their renewables, then the load factor of the coal just goes down, right? But it's there to be ramped up when the renewables are not there. When you go and look at every country, they don't go and shut down their thermal plants in replacement of renewables. And because, truly speaking, no grid can run only on renewables. You still have to have what is called dispatchable. The question is, where do we get a less carbon dispatchable power? Currently, batteries, maybe gas is a stopgap, but we must understand the technology behind that. So yeah, I think we can talk the whole day, but my key message is that there are no instant solutions. We're in this thing, and I think we have enough capacity. We must fix that capacity to get out of load shedding. That's my view.
Sorry, I'm gonna still quick 1 second. Climate change is my passion. I'm gonna say it like it is. I know I'm not speaking on behalf of ENP. I'm speaking for myself. There is nothing wrong with carbon dioxide. Somebody must tell me. We will delve into that in future. Secondly, the emissions on the power station is sulfurs and your nitrogens. If you scrap them, you create industries. So what exactly are the problems with climate change? Secondly, I don't believe this scamming of us contributing to climate change. Those numbers are fudged elsewhere. It's a complete lie and a facade. Somebody must bring it to us. We will show them that these numbers are cooked. This has got nothing to do with us. Let me just stop there. We don't even have ICCs here.